Welcome to the fourth video in our Foundations of Science series. Today, we'll be discussing the boundaries and ethics of science and how they shape the way scientific research is conducted and its outcomes. As always, I invite you to subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share this video with others who might find it interesting or useful. If you haven't watched the previous videos in this series, I highly recommend checking them out first, as they provide important background knowledge for what we'll be covering today. Science is the process of using empirical evidence to create knowledge. It has been a human endeavor for centuries and involves many different activities, from designing experiments to analyzing data and writing papers. But what makes science good or bad? In this lesson, we'll explore some of the ideas that have shaped scientific practice over time and continue to guide scientists today. The boundaries of science have changed throughout history. You may be surprised to learn that science has always been a human activity. The boundaries and ethics of science have changed over time, but they have never been static. If you look at the history of any area of study, whether it's medicine or physics or chemistry, you can see how those fields have evolved from their roots in ancient Greece and medieval Europe through eras like the Enlightenment and Victorian Age. These changes were not just about new discoveries, they were also about what we think it means for something to be true or false, how we should behave as scientists, and how society should interact with us as researchers. The boundaries between science and non-science are not clear, cut. They shift according to social values at any given moment in history, and sometimes those shifts happen very quickly. Scientists and the public have different views on what constitutes ethical conduct in research. Scientists and the public have different views on what constitutes ethical conduct in research. The public tends to be more cautious than scientists, who often see their work as being outside of normal moral constraints. The boundaries between science and other fields are not always clear, so it's important for scientists to think about how their actions will be perceived by others. The public expects researchers to follow strict guidelines when conducting experiments on human subjects or animals. However, these requirements do not necessarily apply when working with non-living things such as cells or chemicals, although some exceptions may apply. Scientific misconduct has been a problem since the beginning of scientific research. Scientific misconduct has been a problem since the beginning of scientific research. The first recorded case of scientific misconduct was in 1665, when a researcher published a paper that he did not actually write and then claimed credit for it. In 1847, another researcher was found guilty of plagiarism after he published an article based on another scientist's work without giving him credit for his ideas or data. Peer review is the main method used to ensure scientific integrity, but it has its limitations. Peer review is the main method used to ensure scientific integrity, but it has its limitations. The peer review process is used in academia to maintain standards, improve quality, and facilitate credibility of research. It involves researchers submitting their work for assessment by their peers, who may or may not have competing interests with them. This helps ensure that publications are accurate and reliable before they are published in journals or presented at conferences or symposia. Peer reviewers provide feedback on how well the research meets accepted standards of practice within their field, as well as suggestions for improvement where necessary. Research ethics committees, RECs, were established to provide advice on how to deal with misconduct, but they lack independence from institutions and are not always effective in dealing with problems. Research ethics committees, RECs, were established to provide advice on how to deal with misconduct, but they lack independence from institutions and are not always effective in dealing with problems. In order to investigate a complaint, a REC has to get permission from an institution before it can proceed. This means that the REC is not independent from the very institution whose practices are under question, which may undermine its credibility as a watchdog body. Furthermore, if an investigation finds evidence of wrongdoing by researchers or their institutions, then sanctions must be imposed by those same institutions. And there is little incentive for them not to take action against their own employees when required by law or funding bodies such as federal agencies like NI or NSFIP. There is still no consensus among scientists on what constitutes acceptable scientific conduct. There is still no consensus among scientists on what constitutes acceptable scientific conduct. The boundaries of science are always changing, and there are no hard and fast rules for how to determine whether a particular experiment or study is ethical or not. For example, if you were to use animals in an experiment and one of them died during the process, this would generally be considered an unethical act because you've caused harm, the death of the animal, without justification. You didn't need to kill any animals. However, if your research involved testing whether a drug could cure cancer in mice, but only had enough funding to test it on 3 mice instead of 6, and all 3 survived, then this might be considered justifiable, despite its limited scope, because it produced positive results that could potentially benefit future patients suffering from cancer. It's hard to define what makes good scientific research, but there are some important principles that can guide us as we think about it. It's hard to define what makes good scientific research, but there are some important principles that can guide us as we think about it. Ethical principles. Ethical principles and values inform the way in which scientists conduct their research. These include honesty, fairness, respect for others and the environment, responsibility for one's actions, and consideration of the consequences of those actions, such as to future generations. Scientific consensus. Science is often seen as an individualistic pursuit where researchers compete with each other to be first or most innovative in their field. However, this does not reflect how most scientists actually work together on projects or communicate about their work at conferences or through peer-reviewed journals, etc. In fact, many decisions made by individual researchers are guided by consensus among experts within their field who agree on what constitutes best practices before attempting any new experiments, theories, techniques, etc. The boundaries of science are constantly changing, and there is no consensus among scientists on what constitutes good scientific conduct. This makes it difficult for us to know how much weight we should give to any particular finding or method. However, there are some key principles that can guide us in making these decisions. Transparency about methods, data, and results. Reproducibility of results across different labs. Peer review by experts with conflicting views who check each other's work before publication. And finally, an ethical framework based on shared values such as honesty and trustworthiness. Thank you for watching Foundations of Science All 4, the boundaries and ethics of science. I hope you found this video informative and thought-provoking. Please consider subscribing to my channel for more science-related content, and don't forget to like and share this video with your friends. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the comment section below. Thank you again, and I'll see you in the next video.